stories is very ancient. The need to tell stories and the need to hear stories is as elementary as the need to dream. It's in every one of us, not just in the writers, not just in the readers. Every one of us, ever since we were very small kids, we need to tell stories and we need to hear stories. And I tell stories because I need to tell stories, and I have the urge to tell stories, and those stories come from the same place where my dreams come from. When, on the other hand, I have a clear message, I write an angry essay telling my government to go to hell. They read my essays and they don't go to hell for some reason, but I write the same essay again and again.
There have been moments in the last 20 or 30 years when people have thought you might enter politics, that there's even been suggestion that you were invited to join parties. I know you've been a member and a founder, but you are often a writer who writes with a lot of political commentary. Were you ever tempted to follow another path, to not be a writer who writes about politics, but to perhaps be a politician who does writing on the side?
Well, I have a serious disability. I am physically unable to pronounce the words "no comment." How can I be a politician?
Fair call. I've heard you say in the past that you wish sometimes in the debate about the conflict in the Middle East that you could be a sound technician, that when anyone from either side mentions the past, you wish you could turn their volume down. How do we move forward with the conversation about the resolution of the situation in Israel and Palestine without continuing to refer to the past?
Israelis and Palestinians have to agree about the present and especially about the future. They may remain divided forever about the past, and they will probably remain divided for as far as the eye can see about the past, and there is no harm in being divided about the past. We can live with two different narratives, the Israeli narrative and the Palestinian narrative. We don't have to accept each other's narrative in order to live in peace and coexistence. So politicians, negotiators, are very often making the situation impossibly dense and hateful by referring to the past. That's why I said if I had a capacity in an Israeli-Palestinian peace conference, I would like to be the sound technician and to disconnect the microphones each time any politician refers to the past. Those people are paid to deal with the present and with the future. Let's leave the past to historians and storytellers like myself.
I think at this point it might be nice to throw some questions open to the floor. I know there are a few people walking around with microphones, and if they come to you, we can ask the question. Got some people in the floor here, in the middle.
I absolutely loved your dissertation, and one of the things that you mentioned was that as the two sides become more and more tired, this actual tiredness will actually help the facilitation between the two. I have a different view of that. My view is that the War of the Roses are two people who fought and fought and fought, and eventually they were found dead at the bottom underneath the chandeliers. Do you think that the percentage of fanatics on either side, in combination with that tiredness, is a dangerous combination?
Well, it's not the question of the percentage of fanatics. It's a question of the fierceness of the fanatics. The fanatics are a minority. They are a minority in Israel and they are a minority in Palestine. But they are a very determined minority. And unlike the rest of us, Israelis and Palestinians, the fanatics seem to never be tired. And they do everything they can to derail any peace process by actions of terrorism, by attacks on civilians, or by building more settlements in the occupied territories, and by grabbing more and more Palestinian land. So our challenge, the challenge of the pragmatics amongst us, is to tame the fanatics and to translate the general sense of fatigue on both sides into peace treaties. How long this will take, I cannot tell you, but it will come.
Question in the middle.
My name's Robin Manoy. When you talked about the journalists who use the word apartheid as being lazy, do you really not think that there's anything more inherently evil than just pure laziness?
Well, there is malice, of course, and I don't belittle the malice. But for many innocent people who compare Israel's occupation of the West Bank to apartheid, to many, many people it's a result not of malice, but of laziness and inability to differentiate. And I regard the duty to differentiate, the duty, as I mentioned in my presentation, the duty to grade evil, the duty to differentiate between different kinds of evil as a moral imperative. Malice is malice, anti-Semitism and anti-Semitism. And I talked about the fact that Israel evokes a fanatical response from many enemies, not just Arab enemies.
Mr. Oz, my name is Doug Pillemer. I listened with great pleasure to your entertaining and very informative. Whoops. What I would like to ask you is one question, 3 parts. Why didn't you say anything about Israel not compromising unless Hamas, Hezbollah, and those groups first say we will recognize Israel and we will recognize it as a Jewish state? Otherwise, we are not going to compromise. You can't, because that is a death warrant. The second thing is, we will not allow them to come in their millions saying that they are refugees who were pushed out of Israel, because with all due respect, not all of them were pushed out. They were forced out by their own people. And thirdly, and lastly, the settlements that Israel control are mainly territories where, before the state of Israel was established, Jewish communities like in Hebron were wiped out, and they need that territory, and they are prepared to compensate the Arab states for it by giving them land in Israel so that they can keep those territories. Thank you very much, but if those 3 points don't come across, then I'm prepared to become a fanatic as well.
Well, thank you. I didn't refer to those 3 points specifically because my presentation was not about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but if you want me to refer to them very briefly, I will. Point 1, to recognize Israel as a Jewish state is up to us, up to the Jewish people. When we made peace with Egypt, we did not insist that Egypt recognizes Israel as a Jewish state. We demanded that Egypt recognizes Israel as a sovereign state, and Egypt did. When we made peace with Jordan, we insisted that Jordan recognizes Israel as a sovereign Israeli state, as we did. The question of how Jewish Israel ought to be is a subject of endless internal debate, and you don't get 2 Jews to agree on what is a Jewish state. What is a Jewish state to one rabbi is a nightmare to the next Jew. And what is a Jewish state to the next Jew is a nightmare to the Orthodox rabbi. So let's leave the Arabs out of this. They have suffered enough anyway. Point 2, the settlements on the West Bank. Almost all those settlements were built on a confiscated Arab land and not on a previously owned Jewish land. Even those who were built on a previously owned Jewish land are unjust, because the Jews in 1948 conquered tens and hundreds of square miles from the Arabs and built towns and settlements on previous Arab lands. So 48 created a certain partition, Israel and Palestine. And I think we should have respected the land that was left to the Palestinians and leave it to the Palestinians. And your third point, I'm afraid I don't remember. Please remind me. The refugees. On this, I agree with you completely. No peace settlement between Israel and Palestine should contain a massive return of Palestinian refugees into Israel. If the Palestinian refugees go into Israel, there will be 2 Palestinian states and not 1 Jewish state. So, as far as I am concerned, the peace treaty between Israel and Palestine should not enable a massive return of Palestinian refugees into Israel proper.
David Itzkovich. Oh, sorry. Can I ask, what do you think of the fanatics in Iran?
Sure.
In Iran. Well, I'm very worried about fanatics in Iran, and I'm no less worried about fanatics in Pakistan, and they already have a nuclear weapon. In fact, let me tell you that I feel more nervous about Pakistan than I am about Iran. Pakistan is a hair's breadth away from a fundamentalist Muslim regime, and they have the bomb already. So I think this is a great danger, not to Israel, but to the rest of the world. I think the combination of fanatics and nuclear weapon is a deadly combination, and I think not Israel, but the world needs to defend itself against the danger of this combination, fanatics and nuclear weapon.
We have time for one more question, just from over here.
Thank you very much for your very powerful points of view. You haven't covered, you actually mentioned the point of moving forward and not to look back, but to move forward. Do you see any statesmen, not politicians, who can be on both sides to see the benefit of cooperation?
Well, I cannot tell you who will be the actual Israeli and Palestinian leaders who will sign the future peace treaty between Israel and Palestine. But I can tell you that those leaders are already among us. They are alive. They are somewhere in Israel and somewhere in Palestine. How soon those people will emerge, who will they be, I don't know. The most wonderful quality about the human being is the ability of people to surprise others and even to surprise themselves. Somewhere in Palestine and somewhere in Israel, maybe among the parliamentarians, maybe among the first row of leaders, maybe in the opposition, somewhere in Israel and somewhere in Palestine are the statesmen who will sign the future peace treaty between Israel and Palestine. Who they are, I wish I knew. I would have voted for them immediately.
I have one final question just to close with. As you're in a room in Australia, can Jews in the diaspora be part of a solution to the conflict between Israel and Palestine?
Every Jew is entitled to an opinion, and in my view, every Jew is entitled to more than one opinion. Diaspora Jews are entitled to criticize Israel, to give Israel advice, to give Israel ideas, to give Israel tips, to give Israel aids. Israel is not obliged to accept those aids. But we would listen, just as we hope that diaspora Jews will listen to us, Israeli Jews, when we review and sometimes criticize diaspora Jewish existence. There should be an intensive cousinship between the diaspora and Israel. Intensive cousinship by which I mean we don't always have to agree on everything. It's unnatural for two Jews to agree on anything at all. It's actually unnatural for one Jew to agree with himself or herself, because everybody has a divided mind and soul. But let's talk, let's keep the conversation between Israel and the diaspora open and vivid and alive. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michaela. Thank you very much.